You mentioned some just gold nuggets of wisdom in terms of interacting with people. So you mentioned seeking to understand as fundamental leadership. That's something that I learned in some early sales training. It was like seek to understand first before being understood. And that's sort of like a mantra that goes in before any meeting or conversation. Um, and then the other thing you mentioned were there were certain questions that you found to be really helpful as a sales leader. I was wondering if we could deconstruct those two things for how you apply those principles to leadership. So seeking to understand first when it comes to working with different people or trying to navigate and figure out a problem or figure out what's the next step, or questions that you use with your teams that you've learned from sales that have been helpful in terms of navigating the organization forward.
Seeking to understand, I think, is really know what you're seeking for. You're seeking to understand the pain. And so when in a customer context, and even like, now that I'm back in engineering, I'm still meeting with customers, like I'm really trying to get to the heart of the matter. So even if a customer is very clear on maybe a solution that they want, I need an AI ML solution that does X, Y, Z. Okay, the question that I use often is, tell me more about that. Like, what is instigating this need? And kind of, for those that are familiar with observability, it's kind of like doing the trace of like, what was the genesis? What was the path that led you to like this clear idea that you need this XYZ solution? And so think of the next question that'll kind of get you closer and closer to the source of, or the root of the issue. And so tell me more about that. What are the challenges that are driving like your thought process, or what are the things that are really driving your strategy? What's the burning platform? That's like actually one of my favorite questions, because it's like, where's the building on fire? Like, what's the hot mess, But sometimes I say, and sometimes I actually ask a question by giving an example. Like for us, the burning platform is, data normalization. And I'm just making stuff up, by the way. For, here where we are, the problem is this and this and this. This is what we're struggling with. Are you seeing the same things? And that's a provocative question, because I think they could say, yeah, oh my God, we are totally there. We are, we're challenged with this. Or they could say, yeah, not really. Here's what. And then if they're just like sitting there saying, yeah, no, not really, then it's like, okay, well, then tell me more about this. Help me understand. And sometimes even just saying, I've seen account managers or sales reps say, well, help me understand this. I think those are all like fine questions. It's like, this is what I call party conversation. And sometimes to just like get folks in the mood, it's like, the art of like the initial social conversation, kind of like what we did to start, this conversation was like, hey, show us something on your desk. Like, all right, that's like actually a cool party trick. Very well done. One of my favorite questions is, to ask, like, have you seen any good movies lately? Have you gone into the office recently? What did that feel like? Kind of like these any kind of real-time questions that might actually just kind of get the conversation going. That always helps. And that's, good party conversation. But then if you're hanging out with a friend and they're just like, God, I'm so frustrated, I need to figure this out. Like a good friend would seek to understand what's hard about this without having to solve the problem. And here's the rub, is that sometimes when you get a lot of engineers in the room and, they're so smart, they immediately go to, I know what your problem is and I know exactly how to solve it. Not necessarily. And this is the rub. This is like where I see, this is where a stint or a stretch assignment or a rotation or even just shadowing a salesperson is always going to be really helpful, because you get to see the stark contrast of engineers that are going in, making some assumptions and solving a problem with like the toolkit or the portfolio of products or tech that they have in their head. Whereas a salesperson might actually say, hey, if I can actually get to the very, very specific problem that you have, then I can bring in my engineer and then we can align to, or then I can have an engineering conversation with you and like we can align to like, here's why this product that I have can actually solve your very specific problem. There's a art to that, but it's Actually, it's not art to it. You just do it. It's never assume that you know a customer's problem. Always seek to listen, empathize. If you're having a hard time empathizing with a customer, that's like where like you can also start to ask more questions about seeking to understand, because it's better if you can relate to a problem.
Where do you stop asking? Where do you know that you get to the root?
For me personally, Jerry, I stop asking when I can relate or empathize with the problem. Now, I think Brene Brown defines empathy as like you're connecting to someone else. You're using something within yourself to connect to someone else's story or experience, something like that. I think that's very true, in a customer conversation. It's even if you don't know exactly like the internal workings of their product or process, but like the minute you can start to relate and be like, oh, that's really hard. Oh, I see. That's kind of when I stop asking questions. Now, this could actually be really inefficient. If I'm just like, I cannot relate to you, I do not get that, but so that's why you want to bring more folks in the room. And like, this is where design thinking comes in really handy, because now you have a methodology for user interviews and building empathy. So that way you can have you can clarify what an end user experience looks like and what the case study is, what the story is, etc. Design thinking is like a way to kind of help in an efficient, methodical manner get to empathy and stop asking those questions, or know when to stop.